In a world overflowing with magic, monsters called Nemesis fall from the sky, and they can curse and infect everything with their touch. Those who survive the attack and curse of Nemesis also gain the ability to wield a magical power known as Fantasia, making them sorcerers. In the village of Pompo Hills, Seth, a 15-year-old teenage boy who is cursed as a sorcerer. He strives to become the world's greatest sorcerer to save the world from Nemesis and bring peace between sorcerers and humanity. On a tranquil day in Pompo Hills, Seth, a young wizard, agilely jumps across rooftops with a freshly bought loaf of bread, marveling at the beauty of the city. He decides to meet up with his friend Tommy to impress him with his magical spells, but discovers that his magic books have been taken without permission. Despite Tommy's warnings, Seth attempts to cast spells unsuccessfully, and his attempt at his signature move, the Titan Punch, causes chaos by triggering a stampede of demonic cows. Meanwhile, Alma, another sorceress, faces trouble in a local shop for being a sorceress, but she resolves the situation with her magic before noticing the commotion caused by Seth and Tommy. Alma uses her magic to contain the cows and scolds Seth for his constant troubles, warning him about a possible punishment. As the situation worsens, Seth and Alma decide to fly away on a broomstick. Confused by the rejection towards sorcerers, Seth asks Alma, who explains that they are feared and looked down upon compared to the dangerous Nemesis. Seth is punished with cleaning Alma's house and is warned about future troubles. Alma urges him to focus on improving as a person, not just as a spellcaster. Despite everything, Seth remains determined to prove his worth and sets out to become a Nemesis hunter. As they discuss about Nemesis, an egg falls from the sky, indicating the appearance of another Nemesis. Alma sets off to confront it, but Seth decides to fight alone. With Tommy's help to warn the villagers, Seth confronts the Nemesis armed with magical tools. Though he is overwhelmed by the monster, Seth risks everything to protect Tommy. When it seems he is about to be defeated, Seth is saved by the arrival of more sorcerers, who praise his bravery. After the surprising arrival of the Nemesis Hunters band, Seth encounters other sorcerers and discovers they are the Bravery Quartet, a team dedicated to protecting people from the threats of Nemesis. Despite the villagers' distrust, the chief of the Bravery Quartet recognizes Seth's courage and entrusts him with the task of stopping Nemesis. As the battle with Nemesis intensifies, Seth realizes he cannot defeat the monster through brute force alone and recalls the chief's advice about not relying solely on strength. Meanwhile, Tommy discovers that the Bravery Quartet is planning to rob the bank while the city is distracted by the crisis. In the midst of chaos, Alma returns and warns Seth against making hasty decisions. Seth manages to momentarily contain Nemesis, but he discovers that the Bravery Quartet has been taking advantage of the situation for their own benefit, which triggers his anger and disillusionment. Nevertheless, Seth confronts Nemesis, determined to protect the citizens, rejecting the chief's propositions for him to only fight for himself. While the Bravery Quartet watches from afar, surprised by Seth's change, he rises to confront the threat of Nemesis, demonstrating his determination to be a true protector of the people. Seth emerges as the hero by rescuing the occupants of the bank from the fantasy explosion caused by Nemesis. Using his magic without the need for artifacts, Seth seemingly defeats the monster with his powerful Titan Punch. Although Nemesis barely survives, his injured body is ultimately destroyed by Alma's skull attack, who then tends to Seth's wounds. Alma chastises Seth for his recklessness in using magic without protection and warns him about the Inquisition, although Seth trusts in the villagers' gratitude. Tommy returns the remnants of Seth's gloves and thanks Alma for saving them. However, Alma feels that there will never be understanding between the common people and the witches. Determined to destroy all the Nemesis and change the perception towards sorcerers, Seth plans to locate the supposed enemy nest called Radiant. Alma shares the story of how she found Seth after they both lost their memories in an attack. Since then, Alma has been dedicated to protecting Seth and uncovering his past. Alma recalls her efforts to find clues about their past lives, but without success. Despite the challenges, she decided to raise Seth as a true sorcerer, taking him to live in a floating house to protect him. When Seth decides to set off in search of Radiant, Alma supports him with tools and words of encouragement, asking him not to become a monster. With tears in her eyes, Alma watches Seth depart on his new broom, while even the villagers bid farewell to the young sorcerer. The researcher from the Artemis Institute, named Doc, was approaching the Alma Observatory aboard a ship with the peculiar shape of a pig. During his approach, he consulted Alma about the location of the remains of the Nemesis Golem. Meanwhile, it was revealed that an Inquisitor ship under the command of Captain Dragunov had captured a sorcerer and was continuing its search for more. Alma complained of having contacted the Artemis Institute 3 days prior, claiming that Doc had instructed his assistant to head to Pompo Hills to prepare for his arrival. Doc, bewildered, suspected that his assistant had once again gone astray. Simultaneously, the Inquisitors attempted to arrest Seth, who resisted vigorously aboard his ship. Intrigued by the commotion, Dragunov asked for the reason, and his knights explained that Seth had collided with their ship and that, in attempting to interrogate him, a fight had ensued. Noticing Seth's horns, Dragunov inquired if he was a sorcerer. Seth admitted to being one, which led the Inquisitors to arrest him and confine him in a cage of black silver. Seth pleaded to be released to hunt Radiant, but Dragunov dismissed him and ordered to keep him on board for being cursed. Alma had instructed Seth to seek out the powerful sorcerer Yaga in a research village called Artemis. Meanwhile, aboard the ship, Seth discovered Melly, a small floating creature, and a girl named Melly trapped beneath the vessel. Melly revealed herself to be a sorceress sent from Nemesis, accompanied by her friend Mr. Boobry. After being separated from her friend Doc, Melly found herself trapped and admired Seth's horns. However, their encounter was interrupted by a sudden commotion on the ship, at which point Doc made his entrance. Melly recognized Doc and immediately revealed her true identity. Upon realizing that Doc was carrying the remains of Nemesis, Dragunov also arrested him. Inside the ship, Seth and Doc introduced themselves, and Seth discovered that Melly was Doc's assistant. Doc explained that he was researching Nemesis, stating that defeating them one by one was monumental. Seth pledged to defeat them using Radiant, and Doc revealed that Alma was the woman who had raised him. While attempting to escape, Mr. Boobry managed to steal keys, facilitating their liberation. However, they were intercepted by Dragunov and his knights. Seth used his Titan Punch to repel them, surprising Dragunov by seeing him use magic without instruments. Facing the resistance of the knights, Melly protected the group with her defensive magic, but suddenly switched to an offensive attitude when her alternate personality was unleashed under extreme stress. Impressed by her power, Seth became alarmed by her behavior. While attempting to flee, Dragunov threatened to shoot Melly, but Seth used his Titan Punch to free Doc's ship. Escaping towards the Artemis Academy, the sorcerers left the bewildered knights behind, who ceased their hostilities as they approached the city of the sorcerers. After evading the Inquisition, Melly, Doc, and Seth arrive exhausted at the Artemis Institute's docking station. Seth is astonished to see the multitude of sorcerers bustling in the city, but Melly warns him that he must go through the citizen registration process to be able to use the facilities. Reluctantly, Seth submits to the process under Doc's insistence, who fears missing the admission ceremony. In the corners, an enigmatic figure murmurs their doubts upon hearing the name Alma. Amidst the ceremony, Seth identifies Lord Majesty as the yellow cat Alma had warned him about. Lord Majesty outlines the Artemis Institute's mission to eradicate the curses afflicting sorcerers. Though Seth appears disinterested, he and his companions complete the citizenship procedures without realizing the hidden conditions that bind them with debts. Doc secretly celebrates seeing his plan take effect upon discovering that Seth's debt is his doing. Seth, regretting not heeding Alma's warnings, decides to seek out Yaga and continue his journey without settling his debt, much to Doc's distress. Despite Doc's pleas, Seth and Melly embark on their search for Yaga, wreaking havoc and adding to their debt. After an exhausting day, the trio rests in a park where Doc is recognized as the Debt King. A mysterious old man hints at knowing Yaga's whereabouts, but before sharing the information, he questions Lord Majesty's intentions regarding extorting his citizens. Before they can respond, the alarm rings out. The Inquisition is approaching to capture them. However, the militia of the Artemis Institute intervenes and foils the plans of the Inquisition. A swarm of sorcerers surrounds the city, halting the advance of their pursuers. An inquisitorial soldier informs the vice captain that they have received orders to retreat, a result of the effective use of resources by the Artemis Institute. Captain Dragunov reveals the institution's political and military power, as well as the presence of members from the Coven of the 13 Sorcerers, warning about their formidable nature. As the Inquisition retreats, the old man speaks again, highlighting the protection provided by the Artemis Institute to sorcerers. He interrogates Seth about his plans after finding Yaga. Seth expresses his determination to become powerful enough to confront Radiant, receiving disapproval from the old man. However, the latter reveals his true identity as Yaga. Later, it is revealed that Dragunov has informed the Grand Inquisitor about his findings, warning him about the danger posed by Seth. They both agree that the young sorcerer must be captured, thus sealing the uncertain fate of Seth and his companions. Melly rises at dawn, radiating optimism towards the new day and sharing it with her beloved cardboard dolls. But her serene routine is suddenly interrupted by the distant cries of Seth, who clumsily collides with her window, desperately clamoring for help to learn magic. Seth, eager to master a basic offensive spell like meteor drops to impress the high wizard Yaga, seeks Melly's assistance. Despite her willingness to help, Melly can only employ defensive magic in her attack form, as her specialization lies in defensive magic. Before Seth departs to train on his own, Melly suggests seeking out someone else who might be able to assist him. They soon find Doc at the Kettle Coffee Cafe just as he is about to confess his love to Miss Melba. However, his confession is interrupted by the sudden arrival of Seth and Melly. Amidst the chaos, Seth tricks Melly into believing that Doc is interested in her, triggering a series of comedic misunderstandings. To apologize for the interruption, Miss Melba invites the trio to a complimentary meal. Seth explains his urgency to find Radiant and the need to learn offensive magic. Melly suggests that Doc could help, and although he is initially reluctant, he eventually agrees thanks to Melba's persuasion. In the training field, Doc commits to helping Seth by reading from a grimoire while he attempts to summon meteor drops. Despite several failed attempts, Seth finally succeeds, albeit explosively, leaving Doc battered and disheartened. After the chaos, the group reconvenes at the Kettle Coffee Cafe, where Melly feels powerless for being unable to aid Seth. Melly's curse activates, transforming her into a more aggressive version of herself, determined to teach Seth through action. Under the influence of the curse, Melly unleashes a massive attack. The meteor drops, and Doc rushes to save Melba. After the incident, Seth embraces Melly, thanking her for her help, and together they search for Doc, who was thrown far away by the attack. The next day, Seth moves into Melly's spare room, expressing his joy at having a roommate. Melly timidly explains her cardboard dolls as her friends. The arduous training of Seth with Yaga continues, and he becomes discouraged to see the scant progress of his learning. Later, in the cozy atmosphere of the Teapot Cafe, Doc enjoys his coffee while chatting with Miss Melba, who attends to the customers alongside her father. Suddenly, Seth and Melly appear with Mr. Boobry, looking for something to eat, and Doc's tranquility is interrupted. Noticing that Doc isn't going to order anything, Melba offers him to try her latest coffee creation. At first, Doc feels nervous, but after some thought, he accepts out of courtesy. To everyone's surprise, the coffee turns out to be delicious, brightening Doc's mood. However, his happiness is cut short when he is surprised by a tentacle emerging from a sewer and dragging him inside, taking him into the depths. Yaga, who arrives at that moment, identifies the creature as the Devil Fish Kraken. Faced with the situation, Seth, Melly, and Mr. Boobry venture into the sewers to rescue Doc, but their attempts fail time and time again. Finally, the group manages to free Doc and befriend the creature after discovering that they both love coffee. The next day, it is revealed that the coffee prepared by Melba was actually the work of her father. Seth continues his training with Yaga, but the young wizard fails to gather the fantasy properly into his gloves, resulting in them being destroyed. As punishment, Yaga puts on him a pair of black-silver gloves that prevent him from using magic, indicating that he will only take them off once he has learned the lesson. Annoyed, Seth leaves with Melly along with Mr. Boobry to have lunch at the Teapot Cafe. Suddenly, Doc appears to inform them that Master Lord Majesty has summoned them for a group discussion. Once in the throne room, the yellow cat indicates to them that their debts have escalated too much, and in order to reduce them, they will have to undertake some tasks. Seth and Melly were assigned to clean the exterior part of the Artemis Institute's ship, but while they were at it, the Bravery Quartet appeared in their underpants to steal merchandise from the ship. Seth and Melly fought together to stop them, eventually defeating them and thwarting their plans. However, during the fight, Don Bossman falls off the ship, so Seth has no choice but to take off the gloves to use the broom and save his life. After that, Seth, accompanied by Melly and Boobry, goes to apologize to Yaga for not fulfilling his punishment, but the old wizard is aware that he did it for a good reason, so he lets it slide. Later, Yaga hands Seth his repaired gloves, which are now mittens. Once the young man puts them on, he is able to handle fantasy much better than before, thanks to his unique ability. Now Master and Apprentice are ready for the real training. Meanwhile, Majesty is pleased to have gotten away with stopping the thieves at the expense of Seth's group. So he enjoys a special slushie made from a huge ice crusher, pushed by an exhausted Doc. In the cafe, we find Seth and Melly having lunch together, accompanied by Yaga, who discusses the news from Rumble Town. Intrigued, Seth speaks with him to learn more about the Inquisition, as he believes they are the villains, but his mentor teaches the young wizard that regardless of the faction, there are always good and bad people. Meanwhile, aboard Captain Dart Dragonov's patrol ship, he spends his time fishing for flying fish. Watching the captain, the new recruit Garvis feels disheartened for having chosen this troop, as there is not enough action and therefore hardly any achievements. After a terrible night of rain and storm, Dragonov's troop urgently mobilizes to assist an Inquisition ship. On a small island, Dragonov and his troop encounter Captain Inquisitor Edmund and his soldiers. Edmund requests Dragonov to order his men to repair his ship as soon as possible, as it suffered damage yesterday from an attack by a Nemesis. Edmund needs to deliver the fruits of his efforts as soon as possible, which involve capturing several sorcerers. By the afternoon, the ship is almost repaired. However, at that moment, the Nemesis that attacked Captain Edmund's troop yesterday appears before the Inquisitors, but completely ignores them. Captain Edmund announces that they are safe as the Nemesis is likely heading towards the city. Indignant, Dart Dragonov mobilizes his crew to pursue the Nemesis. By nightfall, Dragunov and his soldiers had returned and successfully diverted the Nemesis away from the city, much to Edmund's dismay. Later, when Edmund meets with Dragunov, the latter reveals to the Inquisitor captain that he has discovered he has been delivering fake sorcerers to climb the ranks. As a result, he will have to explain himself to General Torque. After resolving that matter, Captain Dragunov contemplates how the Nemesis they drove away had an injured fin. Meanwhile, not far from there, a mysterious wizard is impressed that the Inquisitors managed to scare off the Nemesis despite its weakened state. Following this, the mysterious sorcerer indicates that their next stop will be Rumble Town. After a month since leaving Pompo Hills in search of the Radiant, the young sorcerer Seth found himself resting at Melly's house when he was caught in a dream from his childhood. Upon waking up, his gaze fell upon his teacher's broom, evoking memories of the days that had passed since their last meeting. As Seth stepped out onto the streets accompanied by Melly and Boobry, he noticed a festive atmosphere. Melly confirmed that it was one of the regular festivals organized by the headmaster at Master Lord Majesty, both to attract visitors and to strengthen relationships with other countries, thus making it difficult for the Inquisition to intervene in the academy. Doc, who had overheard them from the Teapot Cafe, explained that Majesty primarily held these events for economic reasons, which led Seth to consider participating in a broom race to earn some money. Heading towards the majestic castle, they discovered that the broom race, sponsored by Majesty, was known as the Artemis Broom Race with a prize of 10 million dimes. However, registration required money, so Seth and Melly, lacking sufficient funds, chose not to participate. It was then that they crossed paths with Mr. Nick, a young, arrogant, and wealthy individual who mocked Seth and challenged him to win the race. The conversation revolved around Alma, Seth's teacher, which unleashed the young sorcerer's anger. Determined to win in honor of his teacher, Seth prepared himself for the race. Despite Nick's mockery and his attempts at sabotage, Seth and Melly showcased their skill and determination, even facing interference from Majesty. Although Nick won the race, Seth and Melly saved Nick's lackeys from imminent danger, demonstrating their bravery and resolve. After the event at the cafe, Doc lamented Seth's lack of victory, which meant more financial problems. Aware of the need to find employment, Seth and his friends prepared themselves to face the challenges ahead. Meanwhile, in Rumble Town, a mysterious individual known as Grimm arrived with a mission that promised to be anything but easy. In the cafe, Doc was on the lookout for a good job offer, desperately seeking a way out of his mounting debts. No opportunity seemed suitable until Seth and Melly, along with the faithful Boobry, stumbled upon an intriguing advertisement: the hunt for an unknown nemesis. Although Doc hesitated at first, he eventually relented, motivated by the possibility of impressing his beloved Miss Melba. Before they set off, Yaga, Seth's wise mentor, offered them one last piece of advice, urging them to exercise caution. On their way to Rumble Town, they were unaware of the shadow looming over them. The Inquisitor captain, Dart Dragunov, and his troop were stealthily following them in their ship. Upon reaching the deserted city, the mission seemed straightforward until Doc fell ill and Melly lost sight of Mr. Boobry. They decided to split up to search for him. But soon they encountered the Nemesis they were seeking. The chase took an unexpected turn when another identical Nemesis appeared and attacked them. Seth, using his skills, managed to take down one of the Nemesis, causing the other one to go on the defensive. However, before they could capture them, they received a signal and escaped, leaving the duo bewildered. Their surprise grew when they faced a pack of Nemesis. Amidst the chaos, Seth was caught by a mysterious sorcerer named Grimm, who interrogated him about his presence in the city. Upon Seth's refusal to comply, the confrontation escalated. Fortunately, Melly came to his rescue, forcing Grimm to retreat uninterested in facing the city's inhabitants. With the appearance of the citizens and the Inquisitors, Seth and Melly made the decision to withdraw, but news of the disturbances reached the ears of the relentless Inquisitor captain Conrad de Marbourg, who saw it as an opportunity to initiate a witch hunt. After the chaos in the street, the trio meet up with Doc and decide to hide out all night in a dustbin to evade the Inquisitors. At dawn, they emerge and head towards the Zed family, who hired them to resolve their dilemma. Meanwhile, at the residence of Captain Inquisitor Conrad, frustration grows as they find no trace of the sorcerers who caused havoc the previous night. His mood worsens upon discovering his former superior, Captain Dart Dragunov, installed in his office. Dragunov reveals his presence in Rumble Town in search of witches, although his exact reason remains a secret by higher orders. Despite Conrad's initial resistance, Dragunov manages to manipulate him into following his orders while he enjoys a well-deserved rest. On the street, the group meets with the Zed family, who explain their desperate situation. Their eldest son, Taj, has crossed paths with a Nemesis, who survived but infected him. Fearing being expelled from the city, the family faces the Inquisition's refusal to address the threat. Seth and the others offer help and follow Taj to the place where he encountered the gigantic Nemesis. As they advance, Melly deduces the nature of the Nemesis they have encountered and the danger they represent. They arrive at the abandoned warehouse where Taj saw the Nemesis, only to discover a feather tree indicative of the presence of a large-scale Nemesis. The ground trembles and the Inquisitors evacuate the civilians, revealing the instability of the islet. Seth suggests staying, recalling how the Nemesis appeared the previous night during an evacuation. At night, the group waits aboard Melly's broom and eventually attract the Echoes. Seth attempts to capture them, but they encounter Grim, who destroys the Echoes before departing. Elsewhere, Grim traps an Inquisitor and a citizen in a magical coffin. Meanwhile, a young sorceress plays the flute to control the Nemesis hidden in the city. After a night of relaxation aboard Doc's aircraft, the group faces the disheartening reality. The mission seems increasingly perilous, especially with the growing presence of the Inquisition in the city. Doc, aware of the risks, decides to withdraw, but before doing so, Seth inquires about the mysterious glowing mark he saw on the Echo Nemesis. Doc, with his knowledge on the subject, reveals that those marks indicate that the Nemesis is being controlled by a Dominator witch. The following day, Captain Dart Dragonov, disguised among the crowd, listens attentively as the town crier blames immigrants and the infected for the recent unrest, stoking public anger. Upon returning to the captaincy, he confronts Conrad de Marburg for his negligence with the Nemesis and manipulation of people's sentiments against immigrants. After leaving Doc, Seth and Melly return to the Zed family home, only to discover that it has been looted. The situation becomes even more tense when a resident informs them about the Inquisition's searches for the infected. Fearing for Taj, Seth and Melly set out to find him, while Conrad incites the population in the public square. Meanwhile, Doc, attempting to escape the city, stumbles upon a nest of Nemesis and is captured by the Inquisition guards. On the other hand, Seth and Melly manage to rescue Taj from a lynching plan by the enraged citizens, but soon find themselves cornered at the wall of 12th Street. As Conrad and his troops arrive, firing a warning shot, Seth attempts to calm the situation, but confrontation is inevitable. Conrad's tanks display their might, and the Inquisitor captain orders the infected to surrender. After being captured by Conrad de Marburg, Seth and Melly are subdued and disarmed. Melly is locked in a cage of black silver alongside the battered Doc. Meanwhile, Conrad brings Seth and Taj before the citizens, accusing them of harboring an infected and hiding Nemesis on 12th Street. In a desperate attempt to halt the massacre, Seth confronts Conrad and strikes him with fury, but the Inquisitor captain rises strengthened by a potion and orders the tank attack. At this critical moment, Grim intervenes to stop the assault and joins Seth after clearing up a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Melly discovers the tragic death of Doc and, with determination, frees herself with the help of Mr. Boobry, bravely facing a Nemesis, vowing not to allow any more deaths before her. Grim heads towards the clock tower while battling the Echoes, questioning the actions of the Dominator. Meanwhile, Seth confronts Conrad in a fierce battle, while Taj realizes that the only way to free the citizens is by passing through them. Elsewhere, Dragonov and his men fight against the Nemesis, chasing the citizens until Melly and Boobry appear to assist them, saving Dragonov from an Echo with a precise arrow shot. The Dominator, using the Nemesis source, tears the bell from the clock tower, threatening to replicate the disaster of District 13. Taj, determined to free the imprisoned people, battles Conrad while Seth protects him. Taj manages to open one of the gates but faces the difficult decision of saving all the citizens. Meanwhile, the Dominator commands the Nemesis source to release the bell, setting the stage for an imminent disaster. Hamelin surprised everyone by ringing the bell on Street 6, leaving Conrad of Marburg furious as he lost his operating base. She then unveils a story from Rumbletown's past. 15 years ago, the Inquisition took 4 infected children, known as the Defensive Entities, to use them against the Nemesis. The citizens sent them to the prison on Street 13, where the Inquisitor Auctioneer gave them a flute. Conrad, resentful towards the children, devised a plan to incite the citizens to attack them, but Auctioneer saved them, dying in the attempt. Sometime later, a Nemesis egg arrived on the islet. Conrad suggested evacuating the civilians to the prison to protect them and proposed using Hamelin to fight against the Nemesis. Auctioneer refused, but Conrad betrayed him, killing him and another Inquisitor. About to kill Hamelin, the wounded Auctioneer protected her, dying at the hands of Conrad. As she flees, Hamelin remembers Auctioneer's comforting words and uses her flute to calm the Nemesis, who save her from the destruction of Street 13. Back in the present, Hamelin reveals the truth about Conrad to the people, who admit his cruelty. The citizens turn against him, believing Hamelin will save them, but she plans to exact revenge for their suffering. Grim appears to confront Hamelin and a confrontation ensues. Back at the wall, Conrad orders his troops to prepare to attack Street 12. But Seth intervenes, furious at what he has heard, and confronts Conrad. Amidst the argument, Conrad charges at Seth, but the latter manages to stop him, surprising the Inquisitor. Nonetheless, Conrad reacts swiftly, sending Seth flying. The young sorcerer uses magic to cushion his fall and counterattacks like a bullet towards Conrad, who blocks the attack with his lance but receives a blow to the stomach. Enraged, Conrad attempts to attack again, but Seth dodges and delivers a powerful kick to his face, slightly denting his lance in the process. Conrad realizes how Seth can stop his attacks and hit with force, which angers him even more. He tries to grab Seth to throw him into the air. On one side of the wall, the Zed family and Taj recognize the young sorcerer. Conrad aims his lance at Seth to shoot, but Seth regains consciousness in time and braces for the attack. Then Conrad pulls the cord of his lance to bring Seth down. He believes he has finished him off, but Seth has miniaturized the lance's tip into Grimm's bandage. Seth concentrates a large amount of fantasy as he falls, delivering a powerful blow to Conrad, who barely withstands the attack. They continue to fight, but Conrad's lance breaks in the process, and Seth destroys the wall of Street 12 with his stunning blow. After defeating Conrad and Marber and bringing down the wall of Street 12, Seth finally glimpses Taj reuniting with his family. But his moment of triumph is abruptly interrupted by Captain Dart Dragunov, who initially plans to arrest him for his actions. After a conversation with Seth, Dragunov decides to let him continue with the mission of stopping the Dominator, though he warns him that he will be arrested once the situation is resolved. Meanwhile, in the Sea of Clouds, aboard the high-speed ship of the Inquisition, General Torque and his thaumaturgist receive information about Conrad's activities through the communicator provided by Dragunov. Despite discussions among the thaumaturgists regarding the captains, Torque prioritizes the capture of the Horned Wizard and sends the mysterious hooded figure to investigate. In Rumble Town at the Clock Tower, Grimm confronts Hamline and her nemesis Source in an intense battle. Despite injuring the Source and capturing Hamline, Grimm is surprised when she frees herself and escapes using a knife deminiaturized from her flute. On her part, Melly lies unconscious among the rubble, but thanks to Boobry, she regains consciousness. However, upon awakening, she finds herself surrounded by echoes and overwhelmed by guilt for having lost another loved one. She suffers an aggressive crisis upon remembering the death of her older sister due to a nemesis in her childhood, destroying all the echoes around her. In the midst of her frenzy, she encounters Seth, who manages to calm her down and reveal to her that Doc is alive in the form of a baby. Moved by the news, she regains hope and proposes a plan to stop the Dominator while they confront the Nemesis. Despite Grimm's warning about the danger, Seth and Melly decide to proceed with their mission, while Grimm protects Doc and Boobry. In the Clock Tower, Hamline and her nemesis Fuente watch as the destruction of the city halts thanks to a group of wizards approaching them. Hamline attempts to attack the group with her miniaturized echoes, but Seth intervenes to stop them. Grimm and Melly manage to dodge the attack, but Seth gets caught in the midst of the battle and remains unscathed thanks to someone's intervention. He wakes up inside a bubble and is found by a hooded figure with horns, who introduces himself as Piodan. Meanwhile, Melly and Grimm worry about Seth, but they are relieved to see him alive. They decide to confront the Dominator and her nemesis Fuente. Grimm distracts Hamline while Melly attempts to attack Fuente with a spell, but she is blocked. Despite the attacks, Melly manages to survive and tries to reason with Hamline, who refuses to stop. Grimm intervenes and Melly blocks her fantasy with the loot lantern. Grimm destroys the Dominator's nemesis. Inside the Clock Tower, Piodan talks with Seth and encourages him to join the battle. Meanwhile, Hamline attacks furiously, forcing the wizards to retreat. At that moment, Seth emerges from beneath the Dominator, ready to confront her. Grimm and Melly find themselves in a tight spot trying to stop Hamline when Seth enters the scene. As expected, the two young ones face off, while Grimm and Melly step back as the tower was soon to collapse. Seth realizes he can't defeat her directly after attempting his Skull Burst attack, which proves futile. So he shifts his focus and pretends to be on her side to get closer to her, as she mentioned that he was aiding her own enemy. At that precise moment, Seth seizes the opportunity to try to defeat her. During the fight, they debate which course of action to take. Should they destroy the humans who belittle them, or forgive them and endure the hatred? She seems to let her guard down by opening up emotionally to him, and he takes advantage of this, knocking her down and leaving her unarmed. Then he proposes a third option, to find the Radiant and seek a way for everyone to coexist peacefully. At the very moment when Seth was starting to convince Hamline to join him in finding the Radiant and working together, their plan is interrupted when the thaumaturgists, led by General Torque, appear with the intention of capturing Seth, whom they consider a threat. Hamline confronts Torque to allow Seth and his friends to escape, but tragically she dies at the hands of the general. Upon witnessing Hamline's death, Seth is filled with rage and charges at Torque. From a distance, Piodan activates Seth's hidden powers, transforming him into a creature with a wild, beast-like gaze. With his powers unleashed, Seth bravely faces his enemy, leaving the thaumaturgists astonished as they see the Horn Boy defy their leader. However, Grim, aware that Seth is at a disadvantage, intervenes and pulls him away from the confrontation. Shortly after, a magical locomotive from Artemis arrives to rescue them. Everyone, including Doc, boards the train and heads towards the city of Artemis. Once there, Millie and Doc take care of Seth, who has been unconscious for days. Millie has been looking after him all this time, even giving up her bed for him to rest. When Seth finally wakes up, both Millie and Doc are overjoyed to see him recovering. Soon, Grim joins them and Seth expresses his profound gratitude for saving him. After thanking his friends, Seth asks about Hamling's Nemesis. Millie informs him that they are fine and now live peacefully in the grounds of the Artemis Academy. Upon hearing this news, Seth feels a great sense of relief. After recovering from his injuries, Seth seems to be physically good as new. He still feels depressed about the loss of Hamlin. However, his fame has grown considerably following the events in Rumble Town. All the newspapers in Artemis have talked about him, and he is now known as the Debt King, due to the enormous amount of debt accumulated by him and his group, the largest in the city's history since its foundation. That same night, Seth attends a party organized by Majesty to celebrate his exploits. Before entering, Seth notices that Doc has grown. Apparently, he took an elixir to increase his age, but the result was only a few years of growth and a position that cost him a fortune. During the party, all the guests lavish praise on Seth, but he still feels saddened by Hamlin's death, so much so that he decides to leave the party to clear his mind a bit. However, before leaving, he gives a good punch to the arrogant Nick, who deserved it. To distract himself, Seth visits the enclosure where Hamlin's Nemesis are kept. Suddenly, Alma appears and tells him that the people on Island 21 treat her well and no longer fear her. She hands him a letter in which Taj informs him that since Seth defeated Conrad, things in Rumble Town have improved and everyone is living peacefully. The main concern now is rebuilding the city. After finishing reading the letter, Alma tells Seth that although he couldn't save Hamlin, he achieved other things that, though small, have changed the world for the better. Upon hearing this, Seth regains some of his spirits. The next day, Seth has a nightmare in which he transforms and loses control, and to make matters worse, Melly calls him a monster. This causes him to wake up immediately, disturbed. Meanwhile, the thaumaturges begin to discuss their plans. During the conversation, Torque reveals that they plan to invade Sifander to defeat the Wizard Knights. Dragonal, on the other hand, feels depressed about what happened in Rumble Town, as he considers himself responsible for Conrad's behavior, who was his pupil in the past. A few hours later, Torque meets with Piodin, seemingly plotting something together. That same night, Dragonov informs his right-hand man that he will step down from his position and leave him in charge of the squadron, as Torque has entrusted him with a mission to travel to Sifander to defeat the Wizard Knights. His right-hand man assures him that they will be awaiting his return and will follow him faithfully wherever he goes. With these words in mind, Dragonov leaves his soldiers behind and sets off for Sifander. On the other hand, Yavin advises Seth to travel to Caslin Merlin, the capital of Sifander, where he might find information about the Radiant. But when everything seemed calm, several eggs of Nemesis fall on Artemis. Doc alerts Seth that Melly is in danger, as one of the eggs has fallen on the island near where she is gathering mushrooms. Without hesitation, Seth rushes to rescue her. Upon reaching the pond where Melly is, Seth confronts a flying Nemesis. Trapped by the creature, Seth activates his hidden powers and manages to defeat the Nemesis. However, he feels terribly guilty for losing control again, especially because Millie witnessed everything, even Alma noticed it from a distance. The following day, Seth makes the decision to travel to Sifander alone, fearful of losing control again and harming his friends. Before departing, he leaves a farewell letter to Melly explaining the situation. With his sights set on the capital of Sifander, Kaisley and Merlin, Seth prepares to embark on his solo journey. After a few days, Seth wakes up in his magical flying house, where he is surprised to find out that the members of the Bravery Quartet now work for Alma. They begin to perform acrobatics to introduce themselves, very similar to those of an anime known to all of us. Seth asks why there are only two of them now, as only Boss Man and Juliver Jeno were present, and they explain that the group split up while fleeing from Artemis. This duo was hiding while they healed their wounds, and just as they were about to be attacked by the Nemesis, Alma appeared to save them, and now they are her slaves. Seth tells Alma that he met someone in Rumble Town who claimed to be his brother. Although she didn't want to give much importance to the matter, denying that it could be true, he explains that he felt a connection with him, as if their souls and memories were intertwined. Despite Alma and Seth not remembering anything from the past, she tells him that she has a bad feeling about it. Meanwhile, we see Dragunov traveling to Snowy Mountains, where he encounters Lissala. She guides him to the hideout of the Inquisitors, where Dragunov observes a giant sculpture of the founder of the Inquisition. Torque, who is also present, comments that this statue is the oldest and was the representation of the head of the Inquisition. Later, General Torque tells Dragunov that he has decided to make him part of the thaumaturges, as he is an exceptional warrior. Following that, he assigns him his first mission, to take care of the Horned Boy and his companions. Seth meets Alma on his airplane to devise a plan to go to Caislian Merlin. The newly refurbished Bravery Duke gives him a broom for his journey that they manage to get at half price, and he sets off on his new adventure. While Alma and Seth were discussing the events in Rumble Town, aboard another airship, Captain Dart was discussing his new first mission as a thaumaturge to locate and capture Seth. Upon arriving in the country where Caislian Merlin is located, he was accidentally rammed by a giant airship and managed to hold onto a docking ship that emerged from the larger vessel. The individuals on the ship were members of the Baron Merchants. They had a plan to attempt to exploit the natural resources of the country. As the crew members conversed, Seth fell from the top of the ship and landed on one of the merchants. When this happened, mistaking him for a spy, the merchants began to chase him into the forest. Seth managed to escape, but one of the merchants caught him by surprise while he was in midair. While the merchants searched for Seth's whereabouts, mysterious shadow creatures emerged from behind a tree and startled the elder. It turns out these creatures belonged to Seth's ally, Grim. He treated Seth's wounds during the pursuit, and the next morning, Grim set Seth on the right path towards Caislian Merlin, allowing him to continue his journey in search of information about Radiant. Upon arriving at the location, he notices that the cursed and the uncursed get along very well in that place. Later, he meets Mordred and Cybermore, known as the Nemesis Nightmare, who are promising knight aspirants and are very popular in the area. Seconds later, to his surprise, he sees from afar that Melee and Doc were also present in the place. Our young man arrives at the aforementioned city of Merlin and immediately begins searching for information about Radiant. As he walks through the city, he encounters Melee and Doc and tries to speak with them. But Melee remains upset because he left them without saying anything, and thus ignores him. When he went to an information desk run by a woman with cat-like facial features, she told him that there was information within the central archives of the castle. Seth seeks a way to enter the city's castle, but finds himself unable to. While walking through the city, he encounters a strange individual in front of the statue of the city's red-bearded founder named Meyer, who breaks wind to break the ice. This individual tells him that he can help him enter the castle. Our lad follows the bearded fellow who leads him to the stable of the Wizard Knights, all the while explaining about them. Upon arrival, he is handed a saddle and told by the bearded man that the password is Lulu Est Dormita. It's there that he meets a wizard knight named Okaho in the stable, who asks Seth about the whereabouts of Lulu. Realizing Seth is new to the stable, Okaho hands him a diamond which, when pressed, transforms into armor and swiftly sets off on his journey. Suddenly, in the city, a spectral creature resembling a giant hologram appears. All the knights mount magical flying animals and head to fight against the spectral Nemesis, including Seth, who rides a raccoon dragon alongside Okaho. As the attack began, Seth was knocked down and started falling from the sky. As the wizard knights confront the spectral Nemesis and attempt to battle it, they lose control of the fight. Seth, upon falling to the ground, encounters some peasants who are surprised to see a sorcerer with horns like him. He quickly asks them why they are there, knowing that there is a Nemesis and they are not seeking shelter. They respond that the creature appeared out of nowhere, which catches Seth's attention as the peasants mention they didn't see an egg falling from the sky. Then Okaho appears and enthusiastically embraces the young man. Resuming the seriousness of the situation, they observe as the Nemesis attacks in the distance. Before heading back to battle, Seth listens attentively as the peasants lament the ruination of their harvest, mentioning it's a curse from Dullahan. Okaho and Seth enter the scene and begin to fight against the beast, but our protagonist realizes that it is destroying the fields. Okaho insists that their mission is solely to destroy the Nemesis. Seth argues that if they don't protect the fields, the people will die of hunger. They then decide to use Chromin and generate a protective shield. Finally, the two young men manage to scare away the spectral Nemesis. After the battle, Queen Boudica appears, who is the leader of the Wizard Knights and the Queen of Caislian Merlin. She congratulates Okaho, as it was she who defeated the spectral Nemesis. A few minutes later, Seth spots Grim, who was observing everything disguised as a scarecrow. It appears Grim wants to protect Seth for some reason that is still unknown to us. Later, Grim asks Seth to enter the castle's library to retrieve a magical stone. Our lad agrees to do him this favor. Seth is going to visit Doc and Melee at an inn. When he arrived there, Doc was reluctant to let Seth into the room, but then Melee opened the door, and they started discussing what had happened between them. She felt that she wasn't important to him despite all the adventures they had together, and he explained that he did that because he didn't want to put them in danger. The young woman feels that Seth doesn't trust her. Seth tries to explain that he left without warning because he didn't want her to get hurt if he ever lost control of his powers. Nevertheless, Melee closes the door on him. While Seth was sitting outside in the rain, Doc came out and spoke to him, asking if he has a place to stay, and then they bid farewell. After speaking with Doc, Seth headed to the knight's stable and found Okaho training alongside Dracoon. He noticed that she was using strange skulls on her knees and shooting them at targets on Dracoon's body. As she finished, she noticed Seth watching, and the two began to talk. She introduced him to Lulu, who takes care of her dragon and also assists in her training. But due to a curse, she spends the whole day sleeping. Later, she proposed that if Seth agreed to be Okaho's training partner so that she could become a sorcerer knight, she would help Seth find what he needed in the castle archives. They both agreed and committed to pushing themselves to train hard. During a night, Seth seemed to have a dream where a kind of symbol was revealed drawn on a wall. Later, he communicated with Alma, who reminded him of the reasons he traveled to that place so that he wouldn't lose sight of the central idea. After this, he mentioned his dreams, which seemed like some sort of memories. Soon, their conversation was interrupted when he heard someone coming to the stable. He observes as Mordred kisses Okaho's cheek. After that, she seems different, with unusual eyes. Later, Seth manages to enter the castle of Kyle Merlin. While wandering around, he finds a secret passage, following the mysterious path. Seth arrives at a strange cave, where he encounters a hooded figure named Diablo. This individual traps our young hero in a magical box. Shortly after, Seth discovers that the magical box serves to create giant holograms. In simple terms, the little box creates spectral Nemesis, and at this moment, everyone at a distance can observe their giant figures. To make matters worse, within the magical box, a Nemesis resembling a serpent appears, and things get even uglier when the serpent attacks our protagonist from behind. This giant hologram alerts Cube and Okaho, who prepare to go to the battleground. Meanwhile, Seth struggles not to be knocked down while also noticing that the specter stops attacking him. In the distance, Grim observes that our protagonist is in trouble and thinks of a way to save Seth from this situation. The wizard knights arrive at the scene, and upon seeing from afar that there are two specters they must battle, they decide to surround them with 7 to prevent their escape. Before the attack begins, Okaho and Meli appear to halt everything and request that they not attack. However, Brangor seems displeased with them for overstepping his authority. Seth tries to provoke the specter and it reacts by attacking, much to the watchful gaze of everyone. Somehow, Seth manages to escape from the magic box just before feeling like he was about to die right there in that moment. Meanwhile, in the forest, Grim is pursued by Dragonov and Liselot, who attack him relentlessly. Just as he is about to be caught by these attacks, he disappears as if by magic. Seth awakens after remaining unconscious on the ground, and not only that, but also awakens his hidden power. To his misfortune, Diablo witnesses Seth losing control. After transforming, Seth confronts the odd guy who defends himself by summoning magical specters that try to team up to prevent our protagonist from finishing off Diablo. The battle between Seth and the ghosts ends when the odd guy from the cave uses his powers and sends the boy out of that place. Outside the cave is Meyer, who observes this event with his hands behind his back, but appears at just the right moment to catch Seth and decides to take him away to heal the boy's wounds. The spirits went out to see what happened to Seth, and they wonder if he really escaped after that great attack he received. In the distance, they see Meyer lying down playing with some flowers, and Diablo appears asking them if they found the boy. He demands that they find him and kill him by any means necessary so that he doesn't uncover his master's hiding place, and they ask him who that boy was, and Diablo replies that he was related to the one who gave him the scars on his body. Once Meyer sees that everything is clear and out of danger, he informs Seth that he will visit him soon while he is hiding inside the heart of the tree. Meli warns Doc that Seth is in trouble, and as they walk through the forest, they encounter Okaho, who appeared in the place after hearing a loud explosion, and soon Meli seems to sense traces belonging to her friend's magic. Then she uses her magic called Vestigia Invenire, and they begin to follow a light that leads them out of the castle. Soon upon reaching the forest, Okaho warns that the place is protected by an ancient magic that could cause them to get lost and never find their way out. Meli decides to go alone despite the warnings, but just before entering, Okaho and Doc join the mission. Upon arriving at the location, they are surprised to see a giant walking nearby. While hiding from the giant, Meyer appears behind them carrying Seth, so that his wife can heal the wounds of the young man. As soon as they arrive with Jill to heal the wounds of our protagonist, the kids feel terror from some jokes she makes, but she quickly gets down to work. Jill and Meyer enter Seth's spiritual dimension called Sid to try to heal him. But for that, he must first learn to control his soul and not lose control again. After that, with Okaho's help, Doc and Meli manage to enter Seth's spiritual dimension. They also try to convince him to make an effort to control his soul. After this, the trio of adventure and Seth's friends wake up, and Meli tells them that their friend is fine and ready to leave Sid. although first he will stay in the forest to train for a while with Meyer. Inside the floating palace, the Queen of Siphander summons Seth's friends and also Brangwire. She seems to give them a stern warning, telling them she trusts her knights, but in their last battle against the Spectres, the people started to doubt the knights' power, which could lead the merchant barons to try to take over the lands. Later, the challenge was specifically directed at Okoho and Meli for breaking the Gisomani and acting on their own. Without hesitation, Mordred interrupts and tells the queen that Okoho made the right decision. Otherwise, they all would have died at the hands of the two specters. Hearing this, the queen then assumes that Brangwire made the wrong decision. She decides that from now on, Gulism will take care of the apprentices. Later, when the queen takes Okoho and tells her that she has her support, as her decisions are worthy of a Lady Knight. After Seth decides to stay in the magical forest to train with Meyer, during his stay in the magical forest, he falls asleep in a sap bubble. When he wakes up, they tell him that 3 years have passed. Meyer explains to Seth that time in the magical forest is different. While 3 years have passed there in the real world, only a few days at most will have gone by. Knowing this, Seth feels calmer and can focus on his main goal, mastering the dark power within him. During training, Seth discovers that within the Civ dimension is trapped a dark creature that hunts him every time Seth activates his hidden power. Meyer tells Seth that Pavan is very cruel for putting such a creature inside his body. Seth trains to control the dark free charger within him. After he failed again, Meyer and Jill give him a bracelet made of magical wood and Meyer's hair. Meyer explained to Seth that when he loses control, he can use that bracelet to anchor himself to the world and have better control over himself. Meanwhile, the Wizard Knights are alerted to an enemy lurking on the outskirts of the city and mobilize to intercept it. Upon reaching the location, they encounter a centipede that had been attacking a farm in the countryside, and Gulis swiftly defeats it by cutting it in half. Meli and Okoho assist with the cleanup, engaging in conversation, when suddenly a much larger enemy is spotted not far from the first one. The knight swiftly moves to defeat it. While Meli and Okoho fly to help, Okoho notices that the defeated Nemesis was actually a group of Echo Nemesis that had now split apart and begun attacking the farmers. They decide to fight to defend them. In an unexpected turn of events, it seems that the Wizard Knights cease to follow Brangwire's orders in order to heed Okoho's commands, defeating all the Echoes using Gisomani. To everyone's surprise, the Knights, upon seeing the Nemesis Echoes defeated, assume they don't remember what happened. Shortly thereafter, a herd of Nemesis appears. Exhausted, Okoho collapses from fatigue, being observed from afar by two mysterious figures who assume that the plan unfolded as they had hoped. After the Nemesis attack, the merchant barons appeared in the realm to bestow gold upon the peasants affected by the assault. Meanwhile, Okoho and Meli are recovering from their wounds after the battle, and soon Mordred arrives with a bouquet of flowers, saying that he awaits her return alongside the knights. He explains that he has spoken with the high-ranking officers to prevent her expulsion, as he expresses the need for her by his side, citing her as a valuable officer. Seth continues with his training, but unfortunately, he fails again. Then Meyer decides it's time for them to take a break for today. And while they were talking, our protagonist discovers that Meyer is an 853-year-old furry fairy, the last of his kind. However, the Queen of the Forest is pregnant with him, and in a few years there will be more fairies. That's why Meyer cannot leave the forest, as he must protect the new brood that is coming. In one last attempt, Seth concentrates to finally control his strength and prevent it from consuming him. Meyer asks the boy to try to feel his connection with the world, and as his body is consumed by a dark stain, he fears turning into a monster and destroying everything in his path. With the help of the bracelet given to him by Mir and Jill, he manages to think of all the beings he loves on Earth, those he wouldn't want to lose if he loses control of his power again. Finally, Meyer informs him that Seth was able to tether the intruder in the Civ and is no longer in danger. Moreover, now he begins to use his magic to create rather than destroy as before. The moment has come for Seth to leave the forest to continue his quest for the Radiant, and Meyer tells him that the boy is the hope for the fairies and that the world where they once thrived will be reborn. The grand festival event is about to begin, with many entertaining the city's children. Meli ensures the dog is ready for a walk during the opening. Meli's secret alter ego makes its appearance once again, leaving everyone present unharmed. After they both finish their training, Mordred temporarily summons Okoho. Meanwhile, the others begin to notice something strange as they walk away. Meli pays attention to her surroundings, feeling like something has been watching her for a long time. She hides behind the straw, then follows these strange characters from a safe distance. She's soon interrupted by Gulis. As he talks to her, she pretends to listen, though she knows she's already lost sight of those mysterious figures. Meli promises Bobley that if he can track them down, she'll give him a reward. Meanwhile, outside the palace, a figure is discovered crouching and someone tries to attack them from behind. Bobley quickly throws Doc's body for an instant counterattack. Just when it seems all is lost, Millie arrives in time and manages to enclose the captain of the Wizard Knights with her magic. Ranguire explains that Melly misinterpreted the situation because it's actually a Spectrum Nemesis who reluctantly attacks Melly. However, she's stopped by Seth. The intruder escapes into the forest using their broomstick. The others follow suit. Later, two farmers are terrified by the appearance of spectral figures. Using his powers, Seth manages to intercept the enemy in time, who easily leaves Okaho's body. She's unaware of why she's there. Ranguire claims to have been watching Okaho for a long time. Although she believes them about what happened, she doesn't remember doing anything while being manipulated. The young girl shows him a mark and explains that whoever presses that area can command her to do anything. After conducting a test, Ranguire realizes she's serious. Later, they are found flying. Okaho tells our heroes that she must see Mordred if she suspects him. Seth advises her that if anyone tries to manipulate her, she should attack. He also gives her some motivational words. Okaho decides to visit Mordred if she wants to talk about the curse, and he receives her with surprise. Then he confesses, saying he manipulated her so that the higher-ups wouldn't harm her, as it seems both the queen and her servants are involved in everything related to the spectral nemesis. Okaho is now saddened as she realizes her best friend betrayed her. The next day, the ceremony to honor the Wizard Knights begins, and at the focus of the event is Okaho. While she is at the ceremony and without anyone suspecting, Okaho explains that she doesn't want the title of Wizard Knight. After making that clear, she decides to accuse Queen Boudica of being responsible for the appearance of the spectral nemesis. She tells them that the queen used the powers of these creatures to protect her domains and keep her population controlled. Just as everything was about to be revealed, a Wizard Knight suddenly enters the room to inform the queen of urgent news. The Inquisition and the Merchant Barons are about to invade the city. The enemy is filled with determination for the battle that lies ahead. Upon learning this, Queen Boudica immediately orders her knights to launch a counterattack against the enemy. Meanwhile, Seth assigns Doc the task of gathering vital information. Later, we see Doc finding a book containing data about Radia, and he realizes the important page he was looking for has been torn out. Seth, on the other hand, encounters the strange individual again, the one he saw in the cave previously. This individual is named Diable, who also has horns like our protagonist. Diable tells our protagonist that several years ago when he was an orphan, he met Peoden. He explains that he experimented on him and then discarded him as if nothing. Diable confesses that he's hiding in the city of Merlin so that Peoden won't find him. He also reveals that horned wizards are hunted by the Inquisition because they apparently have the power to save the world with their abilities. Meanwhile, outside the cave, the battle is at its peak, and the queen forces herself to use the magic stones to harness the strength of the ancient kings. It must be clarified that the Inquisition and the merchants had prior knowledge about the city of Merli. That is why they were prepared to counter any unexpected attack from the queen and her allies, since Mordred is a traitor and provided that information to the enemy. Suddenly, the Inquisitors put to the test a strange artifact that completely eliminates all magic from the wizards. Sadly, the magical forest where Mare resides is also in danger of disappearing, as the source of its existence is magic. On the other hand, Okaho tells our protagonist that a fierce battle is unfolding outside, and they urgently need our hero's help. Before ending the conversation, Seth asks Devil to join their team to stop the villains, but the young man refuses as he is too frightened. However, he gives Seth a carved rock and tells him that when he arrives at the battlefield, he will activate it. In other words, he will use the spectral nemesis from afar. It is now when our protagonist emerges to the surface and he learns that Dragunov and his company have kidnapped his friend. The queen begins to plan a strategy to destroy the artifact that strips power from everyone, as without it, they cannot win the war. Despite lacking magic, some manage to perform fantastic attacks that inflict great damage on the enemy. Later, we see Okaho held captive aboard one of the aircraft. Before her stands the traitor who once called himself her friend. Seizing her opportunity, the queen rushes at full speed toward the anti-magic artifact, smashing through several enemies along the way. Despite her efforts, she is thwarted by the enemy's powers. Due to various reasons, the strategy changes as Dragunov and Seth end up forming an alliance to put an end to the war once and for all, as it is a shared interest between them. Now we see this villain revealing his secret weapon, which is a massive armored flying ship called Uranus. This ship has the capability to destroy an entire city. Later, with Dragunov's help, our hero manages to approach where the enemy is. This is because Dragunov is not in favor of the methods used by the Inquisition to achieve their goals, which is why he decides to leave his position in the organization. Fortunately, his former crew decides to follow him faithfully. Hokuho remains captured by the traitor Mordred, and he takes the opportunity to mention that all this time he was an infiltrator, adding that he could do all that because his curse prevents him from having emotions towards others, meaning that he doesn't care about betraying his own friends. He reveals that he is one of the sons of one of the merchant barons who sent him as a child to Merle to be an informant. Despite this adversity, Okoho manages to defeat Mordred using her Jessomi spell. Meanwhile, Seth finds himself face to face with Santori. Thus, the battle begins, but before anything else, something completely unexpected occurs. An individual in a powerful armor that also enables flight arrives. Who is beneath the armor? None other than Doc. When the young assistant was sneaking around in the library, he stumbled upon the time stones. It was then that Doc came into contact with the stones and automatically acquired this powerful armor. Without further ado, our wee hero faces Santori. However, before long, he has no choice but to abandon the fight as he decides to aid the Queen of Merle. Now the fight between Seth and the elderly villain continues, and this time they are on the same level of strength and power, although Santori still holds the upper hand. Then, when Seth decides to activate the powers granted to him by the Diabol stones, thus summoning a spectral Nemesis in the likeness of Diabol. Despite all efforts, the old man manages to briefly defeat our heroes. After having done all of the aforementioned, Mordred regrets tearfully, and Okoho also feels sad, but nonetheless she withdraws without helping him. On the other hand, thanks to his special armor, Doc can carry the Queen away from danger. Troubles do not end there. By then, the Colonel had ordered an increase in the power of the magic draining machine. As a consequence, the Queen of the Magical Forest dies. Realizing this, Meyer becomes enraged as they basically eliminate his wife and children. This leads him to transform into a large and very strong being, with intentions to destroy all humans in the world. In this way, he manages to explode several ships belonging to the Inquisition. Meanwhile, Seth, upon learning of the Queen's death, loses control, swiftly destroying his enemy's ships. In another scene, we can see Pivotin and Diabol encountering each other once again. Apparently, Pivotin was able to find him because he activated his spectral Nemesis, revealing his location. While they converse, Myra is wreaking havoc everywhere, with no one able to stop him. On the other hand, when Seth is out of control, a woman from the Inquisitors named Ulmina captures him and tries to absorb the evil from his body. Later, Queen Boudica is saddened because she couldn't do anything to prevent the destruction of the magical forest. To bring her back to reality, Okoho gives her a slap. Thanks to this, she regains consciousness and then manages to destroy the artifact that drains magic. Although Ulmina tries to absorb all of its darkness, she can't finish doing so as they manage to rescue him. The surprising thing is that after coming into contact with the young man's body, the woman becomes addicted to his darkness. In fact, when he is rescued and taken away from her, she becomes depressed and promises to rid herself of all her darkness the next time. On the other hand, both Inquisitors and merchants flee from the battlefield, terrified by Meyer's unleashed fury. Finally, our protagonist regains consciousness upon hearing Millie's voice. Now that he's calm again, Seth tries to calm Meyer down as well, to bring him back to normality. He succeeds upon realizing that his children are still alive as the Queen of the Forest sacrificed herself to save her offspring. In this way, Meyer comes to his senses and fortunately decides to forgive all humans, as that's what his wife would have wanted. The one in charge of caring for the babies before they are born turns out to be Queen Boudica. When the battle comes to an end, Okoho becomes the heir to the throne of the kingdom, but she will have to wait for the current queen to decide to step down. She decides to leave the city to travel with Seth and will return when the time for her coronation comes. Before leaving, Brangor gives Doc one of the magic stones, the one that allows him to use his powerful armor whenever he needs it. Melly, Okoho, Doc, and Seth bid farewell to the queen and the city, continuing their journey to find the Radiant. The end! Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new anime recaps.